proposed ordinance. Is that so?
Yes,
Yeah, I have, yes.
Assume everybody
I watched the Cohen PowerPoint.
the planning commission minutes or meeting when they discussed the background for the ordinance.
Yep. That was Mike Roberts, who works for the Cohen Law Group, who made the presentation to the Planning Commission. Yeah, we did watch that.
Does anybody have, I have a suggestion, but if anybody has any comment, now's a good time to put it in.
You know what? I'm sorry. I have to jump in. We are required to reorganize as the first matter of business. I just reached out to the executive assistant to the township manager for confirmation on that, and she says it's a must. So I'd like to just pause the meeting until you all are prepared to do that, and then we can move on with the agenda.
Say again. Say again.
And do you mind? He might be able to hear you better if you relay what I just said.
All right, Molly wants us to have a reorganization now and elect a chair and vice chair, I guess. I'm just relaying the message.
Well, I think it's a little abrupt. I don't think anybody's prepared for it, but.
I understand, and I apologize for the abruptness. However, Peggy is now reaching out to our attorney to see if there's any wiggle room, but this is really the standard practice. You all haven't met in a long time, and it's essential that we reorg before we begin the agenda.
So it could, yeah, I'd like to raise my concern. My concern is that normally under Robert's Rules of Order, you would give the full group a certain amount of advance notice of what the agenda items are going to be. And the only thing that we told people that we were going to talk about was this draft revised ordinance. And we didn't say that we were going to be discussing this. We don't have the other members present. That's my concern.
I appreciate that. It was sent out via email. Oh, the manager's texting me now. His question is, well, let me just say what I was going to say. I gave advance notice this week to the whole group, but then prior to this, it's been a discussion for months with the Board of Commissioners regarding this council. But ultimately, I think the question is why does it matter? Why would you all prefer to do it at the end of the meeting?
We can, and you have a nominee for chair.
I would like to nominate Art Hartel for chair.
All in favor? Say aye.
I'll second that nomination. And I'll approve.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I'd like to nominate Ian Matozzi for vice chair.
I don't think I can second that.
Anybody want to second that?
John, or
Or is there another nominee?
I'll second it. I mean,
All in, so if there's no other nominee, then we'll vote on air. All in favor? Aye.
Who is the nominee?
Ian Matozzi.
I'd like to nominate Brian Kirby.
I'd like to nominate Brian Kirby as well.
Okay. All in favor of Brian?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't think I can vote. Can I vote for myself? I can't.
I think you can vote for yourself, but that's fine with me too. I vote aye too.
Okay. I think that's what was before the lapse, so.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you all doing that.
Okay. And for Ann? Brian is our vice chair.
Yes.
Very good. All right. Let's go ahead with comments on the ordinance.
Well, one comment that I had, Art, is to have somebody from the design review board be involved in the review of the draft revised ordinance, because it seems like the only thing that the municipality is permitted to do is to manage the aesthetics. Everything else, power is pretty much taken away from the municipalities, given the federal and the state legal changes.
I think that's correct, looking at both the text of the ordinance and listening to the explanation by the Cohen representative.
Man, I think that's accurate certainly accurate as far as the the small WCFs go. There might be a little bit more wiggle room with the others, but I agree. I think that makes sense to have somebody from that commission be involved in the review, because I mean, you know, that separate document is really their ballywick, not ours.
What concerns me is the process going forward, because we have several different committees all considering the same piece of legislation. Would seem to me that it would make more sense if we could coordinate the efforts of the committees that are involved, which would be our committee, the planning committee, planning commission, and as design and review board. That would seem to me make a lot more sense to do that, so that the commissioners are not faced with trying to sort out nuances between the three of us. The second thing is, we need, when we get into this, we need to decide what the flow of approval is going to be. What committees need to have a voice in the process. So I think those are the two things that we need to do in order to try to make some sense out of this. So what's anybody else's thought with regard to forming sort of a small committee to interface with the other two committees to try to keep this on an organized basis? Brian, have a thought?
I agree. I think that it makes sense to to coordinate the review among the committees. And as far as, I mean, as far as forming a smaller, like, a subcommittee or whatnot to do that, you know, I mean, I think that probably, I think that probably makes sense just for ease of doing it. I mean, if we want to have a point person on the committee, on the council, you know, sort of coordinating that, or a couple of us, that's fine. I think that makes sense.
Brian,
Maybe-
you realize that you only have until August 29th to come up with a resolution. And then Verizon and Comcast, et cetera, can act on their own. There's not a lot of wiggle room here for this. I watched carefully the PowerPoint, and I dug up some old notes that I had taken from 2018. So you can formulate as many committees as you want, but you're up against it with this. You need to act quickly because the PUC has a lot of power here. And when asked by someone from the Planning Commission, could the attorney for Cohen give us an example of another township that we could compare to Radnor that understood the nuances and idiosyncrasies of it? He could not. So you might want to think about moving a little faster on this than formulating subcommittees and doing other things. We have the issue of the willows and the coverage, et cetera, but I have those notes in my hand. So when we get to that, if we get to it, that's fine. I just thought I'd point that out to you. That particular comment by the attorney comes almost at the end of his PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
Time's yours.
I think we're under the gun as far as time goes. The only purpose of the subcommittee is not to do any further investigation of the ordinance. I think the ordinance has to be enacted in the way it is. The question only, as far as I'm concerned, is to make sure that the 2 or 3 committees of the township that are working on this are in sync, so we don't have 3 separate reports going to the commissioners. It's we're going to try to rehash this. We don't have any room, as far as I can see, except this design manual which they're talking about, and plus the fact that I think the committees have to sort out what the review process is going to be.
The attorney, again, if I can say, gave 2 examples of possibilities that would not infringe on the right of way. One was a small canister type device that would be put on the top of poles. And the other was, of course, the 100 to 120 foot towers, which I think are the township, some of the township folks don't want. Back in 2018, I had a rapport, still do, with one of the Radnor Township commissioners who enlightened me about some of the problems. And listening to the attorney, there are 2 options. And if you saw the video, he referenced, or his PowerPoint presentation, he referenced the canisters in the upper right-hand corner and in the lower corner. And I wish I had the capability of just being able to click on those and show them so we could see what he was referring to. And of course, we all know about the extreme towers. So again, those are the 2 options that he was referencing. And I think that's what the Planning Commission is going to be dealt with. Time's yours.
Would it make sense for us? I know the Planning Commission, I watched the video presentation and I have the PowerPoint as well. And I know that the Planning Commission indicated that they were going to meet next month, to sort of discuss their thoughts and whatnot. Would it ever make sense for us to participate in that meeting with them, so that we could report back our thoughts and recommendations at that time as well?
I guess just to add also to what you're saying, Brian and Bart and John, is to come up with a report for the commissioners, just one report. And so if a few of us from our commission get together with a few people from the Planning Commission and one person from the Design Review Board, then we're preparing one report for the commissioners. So that's one piece. And then the second piece that I would say is through this whole process, we have to be mindful to educate residents about all of this because it is technical, and then make sure one of the things that they said at the planning commission meeting, Matt Golis was saying at the planning commission meeting, is to make sure that there's adequate time for feedback from the residents as much as possible. And I know, John, I'm mindful of that date that you're talking about too. What I remember is that it's 120 days out from June 30th, but we could easily firm that date up, what that date is that we have to meet before everything comes into compliance with either Molly Gallagher or Steve Norsini even. Steve Norsini was gathering comments from the planning commission, and I wonder if he'll be the conduit maybe for the whole process, maybe with Molly adding in too.
I concur with what you're saying. I just believe the time is of the essence. And the sooner you get the information out to the residents, the better off the committees look. Let them know as soon as possible, this is what the situation is. Yes, and I agree that some report should be prepared to give to the planning commission to express our beliefs as to what we think will work the best.
Well, I mean, one report that would go to the commissioners if we work together. I know the commissioners' next meeting is August 16th, so that's another date that we should keep in mind, but we probably have to pull something together, I mean, really pretty quickly.
I couldn't agree with you more.
You know when the planning commission is scheduled to meet? Because I know in their video, they said they were meeting next month, but I didn't get the date.
Yeah, they didn't have a date. I heard the same thing. They
Yeah.
did not have a date. Oh, I'm sitting in the dark here. I don't know when their meeting is, but that would be easy to find out. I mean, I know a couple people on it. So or Molly would know, certainly.
I wonder if that's the next step then, and Art, I'm wondering if that's the next step to ask Molly to facilitate 2 from our commission, 2 from the planning commission, and 2 from the design review board to be this ad hoc committee that would write this report for the commissioners?
I would be in favor of that. Let's see. As far as the township residents are concerned, there are several issues. This has been reported that certain parts of the township are underserved, and one is to get better service. So we need to try to make sure that we facilitate that. And then the police department and emergency services feel that they have some dead spots. So
I'm sorry.
So I think those have to be addressed in terms of what the public interest is. And we have to do that at some public forum. And that has to be well announced in advance with enough publicity. And it probably should be live so that the people who have an interest can come and speak out, and that those who are going to respond are able to do so in an appropriate fashion. Is try to coordinate the efforts of the 2 or 3 committees that are going to be involved in this, and to make sure that we get the public involved.
I agree.
One of the issues that went back to 2018 was the issue of the willows and the ability to make a 911 call in that vicinity. And the Ward 6 commissioner is very concerned about that because of those reasons, because of the willows. And I do know that he has brought that to my attention again. And I think that it will be a sticking point with some of the residents or maybe all the residents of Ward 6. So I don't think in watching, I don't recall, I'm sorry, I don't recall in listening to and watching the PowerPoint presentation that was addressed. Maybe Brian, you said you saw it. Did you see the 911 issues addressed?
I did not, John. No, I don't recall. seeing it
Yeah,
addressed.
yeah, and the lawyer was not familiar with Radnor Township at all, which I thought was concerning to me, that he did not understand the geography of our township. But that's not going to matter. We need to come up with something, and we need to come up with something soon. As
Yeah.
Ann said, we had 120 days.
Well, I mean, that clearly was an issue. I mean, I mean, to my recollection, that was kind of the last substantive issue that we were on the verge of addressing. Had people from the county who came in and spoke to us, and we were going to start taking a look at the whole situation, and it was prompted by the situation in the Willows. And I personally, I live not far from there, and I'm familiar even where I live. I'm on Briarwood Road, which isn't far from there, and the cell service is very spotty in areas around here. But I know particularly the emergency situation you talked about is one of utmost concern, because obviously it's a small area, and you have emergencies that occur there. I personally was involved in one myself some 18 years ago. So it's something that needs to be addressed and should be addressed in this context.
Well, the podcast, sorry, and to the PowerPoint was that he said there were 3 carriers. The facility was constructed for 4 carriers. So is there another carrier out there that wants to invest in this? He mentioned several times that there were 3 carriers. And I can recall from 2018, when going back and look at my notes, that the facility was constructed for 4 carriers. So that's something that I think we should at least bring to someone's attention, so it looks like we know what we're talking about, or we did our homework.
I just want to go back to a point, Brian and John, that you were making, that the presentation that Mike Roberts from the Cohen Law Group made at the Planning Commission July 13th meeting was kind of like a wireless communication facility ordinance 101. It was just sort of the basics to educate the Planning Commission and then to begin to educate the public, if people are going to look at that meeting on YouTube, which is available. It's recorded, thank goodness. So I think the next step is to get into the nuances of how is this ordinance needing to be tailored to Radnor Township? And that's the part that has to be worked on next. It was just sort of an overview in that Planning Commission meeting, and which is good because it is technical. But now the next step, I agree with what you're saying, is that all of these concerns that we have and the particular nuances and needs that we have in our township, including what you're saying about the Willows, that's what needs to be happening as the next step.
Let me interject.
Yeah.
Yes.
I have to say, I kind of thought this meeting was, the purpose of it was for us to look at these documents and supply comments as a committee member on the documents. Is that not correct? Or am I correct in saying that? And I went through and I have a lot of different things that I am concerned with in the documents, and I thought that's what we were doing tonight. Is that right?
Let me make a comment here, please.
What did he say? I'm sorry.
These other concerns,
And can everybody, maybe she'll give until her comments.
they're not issues that can be addressed within these confines of the ordinance. They have to be addressed somehow outside the ordinance, because they are issues of coverage, both by what the township can do and what private carriers can do. But they're not issues which affect the terminology or the application of the ordinance. So I think we need to confine what we're looking at tonight at least to the issue of the ordinance. And having done that, we can then try to open up a discussion about these other issues which need to be addressed in some fashion, but they're not part of the ordinance. So as far as we can see, we have very little to say about the documentation, i.e. what is covered or the language that's used for the coverage. And it seems to meet the federal and state guidelines. So from that perspective, I think our only comment is going to be, okay, so what now? Because we're not going to change it. The other issues we have to raise, but they're not part of the ordinance.
What did he say?
The other issues that we were talking about are not part of the ordinance.
That's correct.
No,
Right,
I-
so are we discussing the ordinance or we're not discussing the ordinance?
They're not
I
part.
can't hear anything Art says, so if someone needs to just let me know what he says.
Oh, I thought you could hear him.
My inclination is to say to the commissioners, if it's okay with the other township committees, it's okay with us. Change it.
Yeah, so Art is saying that if it's for the Board of Commissioners, if it's okay with the other committees, it's fine with us because we can't change the ordinance.
Okay,
It's
so
almost like
what,
that is.
what was what's our purpose tonight then?
I mean, I don't know what the nature of Susie's comments are, but I mean, I do have some questions around the language of the ordinance and so on in certain places and some of the definitions and the, you know, to what extent the township does or may not have power in certain instances or any kind of control. So, I mean, they're kind of in the weeds. Get what Art's saying. I think that largely we don't have a whole lot of say in the language of this thing, but the attorney who presented did specifically say that we had, you know, and this is sort of one of the larger issues, but it does go to this document, the idea of what the review process is and which committees are specified and what goes, you know, what goes where. And that is part of the sort of tweaking or customization of the ordinance for Radnor Township. But I mean, I do, in addition, I did do review of this and have some questions and whatnot. I'm not sure to what extent you have comment or question, Susie. But you know, I mean, maybe those comments can be kind of consolidated and brought forth as sort of this next step in terms of meeting with the other committees or commissions or sending them to, maybe we consolidate all of our comments along those lines and send them to this guy, Steve, who was collecting them.
Yeah, Steve Norsini is on the township staff. So, and that's my concern as well, that, and I think where I'm at, I'm agreeing with Art that it's a process question, that if we all work together, the three different commissions work together and produce one report, it'll be much more efficient than the three commissions working separately, because then that would have to be brought together at some point, and I would hate to put that on the commissioners as work. I think it's a much more useful recommendation if it's all pulled together in one document. So forming this ad hoc committee that would need to work quickly, you know, going back to what John was saying, that it's going to need to work quickly. So should I make a motion that we should have an ad hoc committee and as coming out from our group as a way to move forward with the process?
Try to explain the ad hoc committee in terms of who's on, not people, but who's represented on that ad hoc committee. Persons, but What are you looking at? Is this an ad hoc committee? Committee, or is this of the three committees?
What I was saying is that it would be of the three committees. So it would be another, it's still all commissioners from the different volunteer boards that advise the Board of Commissioners. But it would be a separate committee. So I see what you're saying on it. It wouldn't be sort of a sub ad hoc group of our commission. It would just be a separate grouping temporarily.
Basically, what the do, as far as I could see, process-wise, we meet with the other two committees, draft the final report, which would then go back to the individual committee. And then that would go to the commissioners. But
Okay,
so all three committees would be approving the same recommendations.
okay. Did everybody hear what Art had suggested?
No,
So the representatives from the three committees would get together and draft this report, this document, and draft it, and then each committee review it before it go and approve it as a recommendation before it goes to the commissioners.
I think that's fine. I'm just wondering, how are we going to submit our feedback? Like, obviously, Brian and I have gone through it and have some of my stuff semantic, some of it's where I feel there's a little bit of, what would you call it? Like, saying one thing in one section and contradicting it in another. So I'd like clarification on some of the issues. I believe that when I just reread the email that Molly sent us that initiated this meeting, and it does say the Board of Commissioners agreed to have the Planning Commission and the CCC basically review the wireless facility ordinance and design standards. We would like to have the CCC comments and recommendations to the board ASAP so they can evaluate and adopt the ordinance. And then it says the new ordinance is coming out, a new draft is coming out by this Cohen group. And then they distributed it to us. So I feel it's my responsibility and all of ours to give them our feedback on these two documents because that's what they asked of us. And I'm prepared to do so. I don't know if you want to do it verbally tonight or if you'd like us to just submit them in writing to someone who will evaluate them and, whatever. But I would just like to make sure it goes on the record that all of our collective comments are recorded in some fashion, whether it's tonight or in writing.
Let me make this suggestion. If you and Brian want to get together, or you yourself, and put a memo together for the committee, we can then get the committee to take a look at it. We'll have another meeting and then move forward based upon what you're advising us from your review. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, what did he say?
So if you and Brian, for example, got together and pulled together all of our comments on the draft, and then, so all of our comments would be together, right?
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I'm not on the, I can't see. Who was the young lady that was speaking?
Oh, Susie.
What's that?
Susie, if you said that you had reviewed it and you had a number of technical comments with regard to the drafting of the ordinance itself. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, Susie has comments on the draft ordinance.
Susie, if you put those comments together, and anybody else who had comments on issues that we need to take into consideration, distribute it to this committee, and we'll meet in a month from now and we'll bring it all together at that point. Because if there's some valuable contribution we can make from an actual review of the ordinance itself, that would be helpful. So Susie, do you want to undertake that?
What did he say?
Susie, do you want to bring all of our comments together and then we can meet in about a month and go over?
I'm particularly interested in Susie's comments, since she says that she thinks that there are some inadequacies in the draft of the ordinance as it is.
Did you hear that, Susie?
No, and I mean, I don't think I'm a very appropriate person to be taking notes because I can't hear anything.
No, that would be after this meeting to pull together all of our comments.
I think,
I'm sorry, I don't really know what you're asking of me. I don't know what he's saying, so I don't really know what the question is.
I think what he's saying is that if you have comments, if you would be sort of the clearinghouse of comment. I mean, I have a handful of comments. I can like mark them on my copy and email it to you. And he's saying any other committee member or council member who has comments, if you would sort of incorporate them on, together with your comments and then distribute that, the draft ordinance with those comments to the committee as a whole, and we can review it and then make our recommendations.
Okay, sure.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. That would be great.
that'd be a big help. And I don't have, it sounds like you probably have more than I do. I have a handful of comments and they're more kind of questions that need elaboration, I think, from the attorneys who presented this thing and drafted it than specific recommendations on changes, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, I have about 3 comments. That's it.
Well, if the two of you could get together and consolidate those comments, so we're looking at one memo, that would be helpful.
So Susie and Brian, you're saying would get together and pull the comments together and review them? How does that sound?
Their comments, this is specifically on the issue of the ordinance itself and the language thereof.
Right, just the ordinance.
Right. Then we can
Right.
look at that. Then the other issues, if anybody wants to, John, you had a list of issues that you thought need to be brought to the public's attention, which are adequate or inadequate with regard to the functioning of the existing system. If you could pull those issues together in one memo, we could then consider that. And we would have 2 memos to take a look at. One is a technical review of the ordinance. 2 is a technical review of the system. And we could put those 2 together and look at that as what we'll go forward with at our next meeting.
Sure. I'll have it for you next week or the end of the week. If I got, what's today, Wednesday? Not for you by Monday.
Well,
I'll send it to Susie.
What is that? What did he say?
I said I would send you,
No, I heard you. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what Art said.
Art was saying that you, Susie, and Brian would pull together everybody's comments from our group on the ordinance. And John would pull together the comments in a memo of the township-wide or all the issues across the township that need to be addressed. But those aren't concerned with the language of the ordinance in particular. So this way we'll come out with 2 memos that we can all look at and consider.
Right. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah,
There's 2 different factors here. Yep.
yeah,
All right.
that sounds good.
I'm sorry for the awkwardness of this meeting. Perhaps the next time we can meet in person, which sometimes in a drafting situation moves things along more quickly. But if we pick a meeting time in August, we can then move this forward. So John, do you think you can get this together in a week or two?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can go back over some old notes and then pull some new thoughts together based on what I saw. Sure. I don't have a problem with that.
How long do you think it'll take you to draft your memo?
A week, less than a week, few days. I mean, I've already have the thoughts.
Yeah. And Brian, I think Art was saying, Brian, how much time would you need?
I don't really have a memo per se. I was gonna just mark up my comments and forward them to Susie, and then she could add whatever her comments or changes are, and then collectively the council could look at that. I don't know if it's a memo per se. It's more of, I think,
That's fine. Susie, how long do you think it'll be ready for you to do your presentation to the rest of the committee?
Well, I guess it just depends. Did he say, when am I gonna be ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, I'll. I mean,
Mine will
it
just
doesn't take
depend
me-
on, I'll be ready with my comments tonight, but it'll just depend on, I think what I need to do is obviously add Brian's. And if anyone else on this call has any, you'll send them to me via email, I guess. I'd also like to put it out to the committee members who aren't here, just in case they have something that, if they read it and they just couldn't make this meeting, they should be heard as well, right? So as soon as I get all those comments in, I mean, it won't take me long to put it together, 1, 2, 3 order, but I guess there'll be a little coordination on my end, not just my work, so.
All right.
Do you mind if I say something in terms of dates? It's Molly again. I just heard from Steve Norsini that the Planning Commission will be meeting August 2nd. His hope is that they will have their recommendations at that meeting, though he can't guarantee they will. So if you have any direction for me in terms of coordination with Steve Norsini or the Planning Commission or Design Review Board, I'm happy to take note.
Well, why don't we try to put that in as a deadline, like if we, that's on a Monday, right? August 2nd. So if we put our deadline to give, what is this, our recommendations to the planning committee, or I don't know if you guys want to meet with them, whatever, by the 30th. That would mean we'd have to have our draft of these things done probably by like Monday, the 26th, so that maybe we could meet again if we have to discuss them. I don't know if we're going to need to meet and discuss these recommendations or not next week. The 30th is next Friday. And then if the Planning Commission is meeting the following Monday to give recommendations, I guess we should try to just be in line with them, right? And their schedule.
I could have my portion done by the close of business Monday.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what's necessary to meet the timeline at the end of August.
That's it.
Did you say there was something, Ann, at the end of August we need to meet?
Well,
With
what I have is
Comcast and all that?
from June 30th, 120 days out from there.
120. Yeah, so around the end of August.
We could get together a week from now, the 28th, and look at these two pieces of information that are being pulled together, make a decision at that time as to whom we want to forward it to and whether or not there's any need to have meetings with the other committees. So we can decide both of those things. So does the 28th work for everybody? That's a week.
That's Wednesday? Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think so.
I'm good with that.
I believe that works. I gotta just double check my calendar. What
So
When
time?
you all, yeah,
Say July 28th at 6:30, and then we can send out an email to the rest of the members.
Very good. All right, so unless there's further business to do, let's adjourn and reconvene on the 28th.
Sounds good to me. Adjourn for now and reconvene on the 28th.
Are we-
Before we close, I have a question for Ann Minicozy and Art Hartel. Before we say goodbye.
Go ahead.
I have been trying to do interviews with Radnor residents at Radnor Studio 21, along with veterans for the Library of Congress. And I have been being put off. I've been asking since April. And most recently, I sent another email out on Monday. These are Radnor residents that come to me. I think any of you who know me know that I'm very busy with documentaries, but I'm always willing to help Radnor residents with their issues or their causes. And I've been approached to do interviews at Radnor Studio 21. And right now I feel like I'm being precluded in them. And I'm appealing to both Ann and Art to resolve this issue. Any help there?
And I'm no longer on the board. You're on the board.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Sorry, Art. Sorry I mentioned it to you.
So what I can say in response to you, John, is that I know that you would be meeting with the Mainline TV Board of Directors. Things are a little bit slower now with the recent passing of our general manager, Vince Celli, and the studio itself is taking some time to essentially regroup and get things in line. And so I know
Why
that.
do I have to meet with the board of directors? I'm an accomplished documentarian. I have 2 Emmys, 2 Emmy nominations, and 4 Telly Awards. What do I need to meet with them about?
Well, I would rather talk about that when we have the Mainline TV board meeting rather than talk about it in this meeting.
Okay,
public
just wanted you
meeting.
to be aware of it.
But I know that, you know, the main point of contact for the Mainline TV board is the chair, Jack Brooks,
Well, I will say this to you.
getting organized for that pretty soon.
You and whoever else does not own Radnor Studio 21. It's for the community. And for me to have to meet with people, it's like denying me to go into the library. So I'll leave it at that. And until we meet again, I'll have my report ready on Monday.
Well, I've listened to what you've said, but I don't think that you should accuse me of saying that I own the TV station.
Well,
But we
Hey,
will get things
things are
clarified.
being done. People are doing interviews down there, and I've asked to do interviews and have been stonewalled. So I'll leave it at that.
Let's take this off this table at this moment.
Sure,
Agreed.
And we'll,
no problem.
with the studio. And
Yep.
we'll see if we can get some progress on it, John.
That's going to be a different meeting.
Sure will.
We'll meet again in a week at 6:30.
All right. Thanks very
Okay,
much, Art. Thank you, everybody.
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Night.
Good night.